When the pandemic first started, the first few months here, for me personally, they were scary. I'm over a team of nurses in the ICU, and I was scared for them, but I was also scared for myself. We didn't know what was coming. Sometimes we questioned, is it really going to hit here? And when it did hit here really hard, there was fear, but we still had the courage.
First, we had all these reports on the TV of other places that it hit, that everything was going on. So we shut everything down, and we didn't really have very many patients. And we wondered when it would come to us, and we were nervous and scared. And then one day it was there. And I don't think any of us were prepared for that, but all the nurses stuck together, and we used our masks over and over and over, and we cleaned them, and we washed ourselves, and it was pretty scary. And really the hardest part was just not knowing, and not knowing how to take care of these patients either, because they had symptoms and their sickness was not like anything that we've ever had to deal with before.
Being in Duncan in a smaller community, we watched it unfold around the world first, right, before it hit us. And it hit larger cities first, and we were seeing and hearing these stories, and we still were very isolated and safe in our little town, but there was this fear of what does this mean for Duncan and our community, and we had this feeling of, it's only a matter of time before it gets here, and are we going to be prepared, as a lot of different countries underestimated what the pandemic could do, and how the medical field was just overrun, and the lack of resources, lack of protection with PPE and such things, and how can we start preparing for that now, so that those things don't happen to us, and that we're able to provide the best care for our community.
I think what gave us the most peace was when our administration stepped up, and our multi-level organization, we became one, and we all fought together. Our administrators made sure that we had what we needed when we needed it, and a lot of times they found better for us. I felt more safe here eventually than I did outside of this hospital. But it was still scary, and I will say that fear probably never went away. We just got more comfortable with it. And the unknown was really frightening.
Well, like everyone else, we'd never been down that road before. It was a scary time, and as I said at the time, we're going to get through this, but everybody's going to remember what we did during these times, and so we want to do what's right.
The beginning of the pandemic was interesting because it's something we had never experienced before on that level at all. So scary, yes, definitely. It's the unknown. Those that advise us at the federal and state level didn't have a lot of information to give us at first either. So a lot of times we were on our own as far as figuring out, okay, what do we do next?
When the pandemic was coming on, I'm going to tell you I was really nervous. This is the unknown. And at that point I have parents that I'm, concerned about. I've got all these customers that, I know a lot of their health. I know what we're looking at here. We were actually getting a new computer system in, and I knew that was going to clog us down, and they hadn't shut everything down yet, but it was coming and I could feel it. We actually ended up shutting down, going to curbside only about a week before the whole country shut down. I looked like a genius. It was just by pure luck, because I knew, okay, this is dangerous, we're going to be slower. I've always wanted to try the curbside. While we're doing this computer system, it's going to buy us a little time, and it's going to prevent me from putting anyone at an extra risk. And so that's kind of the approach we took. And then about the time that the trainers left, we all got a memo across the country that says, you're all going curbside. So we just kind of rocked it from that point.
At the beginning of the pandemic, I was in the hospital, and I had had surgery the week of March 9th, 2020. And I remember being in ICU, and the first of the presidential press conferences took place. And I remember sitting there watching it, and at that time, the president announced that there were 3,500 cases of COVID in the United States. And then we had daily press conferences, and every day it just increased and increased and increased and increased. And being in the hospital, not much to do, you watch COVID all day. And so I watched the numbers of infections in the United States, especially in New York, climb and climb and climb. And really, in Duncan, we felt kind of safe, like, this isn't going to touch Duncan, Oklahoma. How's it going to get from China to Duncan, Oklahoma? But slowly I started seeing changes in the staff at the hospital. And they moved me from ICU down to a regular room. And in that room, we started having the shutdowns where patients were no longer allowed to have visitors. And it just, normal life took place in the hospital. And a patient in the hospital for that long doesn't really realize what's going on outside. And I remember when I was transferred to Jefferson County for the remainder of my treatment, they put me in the van to take me from Duncan to Waurika, and that was my first hands-on experience to what it was like to see the community shut down, where everything was shut down, including, you know, all the fast food restaurants, supermarkets, and I was just surprised at how much was not functioning. It kind of, when I was a kid, I remember going to town and Thanksgiving and Christmas, and it would be like dead, you know, downtown. And that's kind of the way it felt that day when they were transferring me to Jefferson County. It was quiet, nobody on the roads, nobody anywhere, because completely shut down. And that was my first experience with what it really had, how it had really hit our community and how it really had reached Oklahoma from New York.
For me, I remember getting the call that we were going to have to shut down our restaurants and close our dining rooms, and it was very emotional. It was very trying, having to tell people that I didn't have a job for them because our dining rooms were closed, and then we were only staffing a few people in our kitchen. It was really hard to tell single parents that I didn't have work for them, and seeing the restaurant dark and chairs up on the table. And when you've been in the restaurant industry as long as we have, it's just unreal to see a dark, quiet dining room and try to conduct business to go and switching everything over. It was heartbreaking. I spent a lot of times crying in my office because I just didn't know how we were going to survive. We didn't know what was going to happen next. We didn't know if we were going to eventually shut down altogether. And it was a very trying time. It was emotional. It was mentally draining and exhausting, trying to decide what we were going to do.
Being a family-owned business, and just also recently the loss of my dad, you know, just a year before everything started, was just, it really weighed on me a lot because the wealth of the restaurants was on my shoulders, and then to make the decisions, just kind of like, you know, what Brandy said, you know, to tell the staff that, you know, we don't have a job for them, you know, because we had to go downsize. I mean, again, you know, it's just being sad that the chairs were on top of the tables, not hearing kids' laughter, people having a good time, you know, just the loud noise that we're used to, and just coming into quietness, you know, knowing that the restaurant's not a quiet place. It's a, you know, it's laughter, you know, a lot of loudness, and seeing everybody working together as a team, and shorten that up and with no noise. It's just, you know, it was sad. You know, I'm just like with Brandy, you know, in my own personal time, I had to break down a little bit, and I'm like, you know, what's to come after this, you know, because we were in the unknown. But, you know, we adapted what we had to on some few changes, but nothing like we experienced ever out of all the years that we worked in this industry. It's, you know, this was something different, you know, something we didn't expect.
The pandemic, when it hit hard. So it affected Douglas Community Senior Center very hard because my seniors really relied on coming here for social activity, for eating. So I had to really think fast on how I could serve them. And so what I did is, when it hit, my mind got to going, and so I asked the community for help. I did bags 3 times a week of non-perishable items that I sent home with our seniors. We would go and knock on the doors and leave them on the front porch because we wanted to make sure that they had something to eat. A lot of my seniors are at home alone. They don't have a lot of family here, or they outlive their family. So I didn't want them to be a statistic. I didn't want them to feel like they didn't have anyone who cared about them. So the community helped rally behind me, and we fed them 3 times a week. They had a little black bag at their front porch with non-perishable items, letting them know that we love them. We see them, we hear them, and we value them. So I'm just really happy to be in a community that really rally behind individuals and organizations. When the time gets tough, Duncan community stands up and they stand proud. So I'm happy to be in this community.
The thing that really became obvious was that the public school is providing a lot of services that people didn't understand that we provide. I mean, we're feeding, we're doing mental health checks, we're doing physical health checks, like all kinds of things. And it just became this crashing down of like, that this is what holds us together.
I remember coming into the living room and Mom was like, "Are you good? Like, what's going on?" And I was like, "I just want to go back to school, it's so bad." And I hadn't really felt that ever because I liked my breaks. But I think when it set in, it was really, really heartbreaking. And it kind of happened for everybody differently.
This one thing, it reminded me that God doesn't need me, He's chosen me. He doesn't need us, He's chosen us. And even if we don't come together in person, that doesn't mean we still don't get to come together. And I think that was this beautiful kind of a reset spiritual moment.
Well, I think Tony and I, we've always had a really great working relationship, and then when this happened, we really didn't have a choice but to come together. We had to help each other out and support each other. And I know that Tony dines here, I dine at his restaurant. You know, we support each other. If we need something, we call each other. And I think at that time, unity was so important because as a community, we were suffering. I mean, globally, we were suffering, but as a community, our neighbors were suffering, and we wanted to help each other, and we wanted to support each other. And the only way to do that was to come together. What do you need, Tony? You know, what do you need, Brandy? We just had to support each other and be there for each other. We reached out to each other frequently just to check on each other. How's business? Are you doing okay? I mean, that was what kept us going and kept us strong here in the community.
We didn't have any quitters, you know, and that was the good part. And Duncan itself is that way. There's not any quitters. Our employees stepped up. They provided the water service, electrical service, all of the things. And even when COVID hit their departments, you know, they stepped up. They did what they could, and you know, we got through that part, which was an unknown part. But like I say, very proud of the employees there. You know, of course, our fire department, our police department, you know, they're going into situations with sick people all the time, not knowing, having to get the PPE. It was a scary time for everyone. So.
The core tenet that I saw through that was that people cared. You know, people really cared about what was going to happen to their families. People cared about what was going to happen to our community. That's what made me want to get involved. Is I want to give back to the community, and I want to. It's kind of like in the Boy Scouts, right? Leave it better than you found it. I want to make sure that one day, hopefully a long time from now when I'm gone, that I've left it better than I found it. Looking forward, I hope that we can focus that caring attitude that is, you know, as shining examples of people that care in our community probably come to everybody's mind, you know, all the nonprofits that people work in, all of the organizations that people give their time and their talent and their treasure to in our community. And I don't know of any other communities our size that have that much of a giving heart.
You know, we really didn't view each other as competition. We just viewed each other as we're a family. We have to help each other out. We're a community. So if straws can get you through a shift and make you successful, then I will give you whatever straws I can spare.
Some of the things I have learned and seen coming out of the pandemic is that we have to be here for one another. We're still going through tough times. Douglas Senior Center is still not open fully. We're still open just twice a week. We understand that, economy has hit and people are having a rough time. But during the rough time, we're still able to feed our seniors twice a week and still love on them. And that's the main thing, is just being able to show love, not just by saying it, but in action. And I think that's something that is a stand-up for Duncan, is that we learn how to not just say things, we do them, we put it in action. So that's something that I've learned, that this community, when something's going on and they hear about it, they know how to come full force in action and show up.
Other things that the community did for the facility and the residents are, they would bring by snacks and meals even for our staff because they knew how stressful it was. Family members would do the same thing, notes of encouragement, things on Facebook, just trying to keep us up and build us up. And school kids would write things to the residents and bring by little things, or come out to the facility and write in chalk on the sidewalk, "Hey, we're thinking of you, we love you." So the community was a great big help.
A lot of people don't realize that we have 151 nonprofits in Stevens County, and they have a direct effect on touching the public in many ways. Well, during COVID, many challenges were presented to them, so they were trying to come up with unique ways to help fill in the gaps, whether it was help retail or whether it was to try to help families. Homelessness became a situation, people not being able to pay their rent, people not being able to work. We saw many nonprofits reinvent themselves in ways to connect with their people. And we saw many foundational organizations like Duncan Economic Development Foundation. They basically, out of their funds, helped support several food banks. Those were important. The Chamber, Main Street Duncan, we were helping people navigate the Paycheck Protection Program to keep people employed. Those were godsends to many, but it was just seeing the entire banking community, whether it was their customer or not, it didn't matter. All the banking institutions, financial institutions, and financial advisors were working with their customers to help them in any way possible to make sure their doors could remain open. And then later the governor opened up some of the COVID dollars they were receiving from the federal to give grants. But those are two large examples. The other is to see how everyone was lifting up the medical community, how they were coming out and trying to encourage the medical community to stay the course. They were basically in the fire and trying to help and save our families and keep people healthy.
There were a lot of dark days where I lost patients that I cared for, and we're talking, taking care of a patient in hospital for 20 plus days every single day and watching them slowly get worse despite everything you're doing for them is hard and wears on your spirits. But I think there were definitely some of those days where I got my box out and I read the beautiful things that our community said to us, and it helped me realize my greater purpose and to keep going, and that we're going to have bad days, but we're going to have a lot of good days too, and that there is a brighter future coming. And so I think the love that was expressed from our community was everything to help us get through this tough time. So
Duncan Regional has probably some of the best staff there are, and I was impressed with how well they navigated, because while I was at Duncan Regional, it hadn't reached the point yet where even the staff were wearing masks. Everybody was still unmasked. And I remember late at night, I was in my room and there was a patient next to me, and it was a senior patient. She had had some sort of procedure or surgery, and she was really dealing difficultly with the fact that she couldn't see her family. She was talking to them on the phone, but she really didn't quite understand why she couldn't see them. And it was late at night, and I heard Dr. Von Felt walk into her room. And I was really impressed with Dr. Von Felt, because Dr. Von Felt was in there and hearing the concerns of the patient, and Dr. Von Felt took her own personal cell phone, called the family and said, "I'm going to FaceTime you." And in a few minutes, you hear the family saying hi to their mom and grandma, And the joy in her voice of actually being able to see them as opposed to just hearing them on the phone was remarkable. And it made me really feel selfish for how I was feeling, you know, when I was already FaceTiming with my family and everything. But it was interesting to see how the community was so moved and moved with compassion for the community, for other community members, and how Dr. Von Felt handled that situation and turned a troubling situation in the middle of a crisis into a moment of peace for that patient.
We took this crisis and made it an opportunity to come together, to see what we could do together, to see how we could lift one another up and give each other strength, and take those fears and turn them into something much better, and that is that we together, there's not anything we can't accomplish, that we as a community can move forward. That's what, to me, COVID taught our community, is that we have the capacity to do great things when we work together.